in the other side of the planet,
Yeah.
Because they might be, or the people on the other side of the planet, because it's all feeding into making life tough for people who are, in many cases, least able to sort of push it back against it. So.
Right, yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it? I don't live on a floodplain. I live in a comfortable society with plenty of money, so I can move if there's a problem, or, it's that kind of attitude where, oh, I'll be all right if something happened. But like you say, there's not many people in that lucky position, so we do need to be mindful about everyone. So obviously things are changing, probably not quick enough. What would you like to see happen? Because it is so urgent that we act, that we make the change.
It's quite hard to know what's going to happen, really. We know what hasn't worked, because there was this idea for a while that you would give peat-based compost. Peat-based compost can be peat reduced now, so it might have like 50% peat, 50% other non-peat ingredients. But peat compost can be up to almost 100% peat. So when I say peat-based, I'm talking about peat reduced and almost pure peat compost. So the idea was that we would have, coming alongside the peat composts would be peat-free compost, and people would understand the importance of not buying peat-based compost, and then they would start choosing the peat-free mixes, and then the market, the sort of market, would make the decision, because people would, as they bought more peat-free, demand for peat would reduce, and then the market would kind of reshape the buying habits, and we would get rid of peat, but that's been a complete flop. Right. This idea that the market would do that. Because again, we go back to the people buying bags of dirt. Most of them, I think, are people who don't listen to radio, don't watch TV programs about gardening or read about it, etc.
I think actually you would be quite horrified. Speaking as a professional horticulturist, I think that, speaking from experience, it's not just the people who aren't that well informed about gardening. I think that it's, a lot of people are still not choosing that option, even if they're working in the industry, even if they're growing plants on a wholesale, volume. I still think there are a lot of people in horticulture who aren't actually taking it that seriously.
Yeah, I think you're right. But if you sort of drill down to who's got the money, it's those millions of people buying a bag of dirt who are where the profit are coming in from. If you see. So this idea that the market would, I mean, I've seen, organisations who represent professional horticulture saying, the market will decide, quote unquote. And I just think, well, how can a market decide if the people who it's kind of appealing to don't have the information to make a decision? That's the problem. If you don't know what you're deciding on, how can you make a choice? That you can't choose something if you don't know have the information to think, well, what is the choice available? So it's been a bit of smoke and mirrors, really. I think it's what I call an engineered failure. This whole market will decide on, and it will get rid of peat because people will choose peat-free. I mean, it's partly what you're saying about professionals, because you see them on social media saying, oh, well, the peat-free compost are not quite there yet. And you think, well, they are here.
Yeah. And they work.
Some growers have been using them for decades to run, successful businesses. So you start to think, well, what's your kind of what are you trying to throw into this? What's your little sort of muddying message that you're really wanting to throw?
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, what does it come down to? Does it come down to kind of big businesses having their fingers in lots of different pies, or does it come down to a pricing issue? Because the peat-free compost generally is, I think, in my experience, slightly more expensive. Is it just as black and white as a pricing issue, or is there more going on behind the scenes to kind of keep a lid on the peat-free compost movement?
I think it's all of the above. Because, I mean, the peat/peat-free thing is quite political.
Right.
People don't like to think it is, or because it's sort of don't want to. I mean, politics has worn us all out, so surely it can't be political, a gardening thing like that. But I think it is, because I mean, there are lobbyists from the sort of horticultural trade quite regularly meeting with ministers to lobby for things like peat and pesticides. Most of it is just buying time, I think.
Yeah.
They say, well, give us a bit more time. We just need another few decades to sort it out, which they've already had. And now they're on about, they want more time, this deadline for the start of next year for no more sales of peat to gardeners in England. That was anyway. It was only an England only thing. That was ditched ages ago, quietly. And now we're talking about 25-year environment plans. You just think, well, you want a quarter of a century more now, to sort this out.
So presumably, if you've got a business where you're producing compost and you've got your nice little revenue stream, somebody comes along and says to you, you've got to take peat out of that particular mixture. Is there enough alternative products for all of these manufacturers to sort of suddenly go, okay, fine, we're going to take that out, we're going to replace it with something else, and that's going to be what we do from now on? Is it just that they've stuck their head in the sand for so long that they've not considered alternative supply chains, and that actually that, is that a genuine problem for them, or is it just a thing where they're going, oh, we can't really be bothered to explore, alternative ingredients?
I think you probably have to ask some of them that question. My own feeling is that, firstly, if somebody, if we're functioning government that was able to say, that we're going to stop you doing that by this date, and don't come crying to us asking for more time. Wouldn't it be a wonderful problem to have?
Yeah.
Say to the whole industry in this country, you're not going to sell any more peat to gardeners anyway. Maybe give the growers a bit more time if they want it. But as I say, there are growers who haven't been using peat for many, many years. It's not rocket science to do that. It's not like we're at the start of this. We're actually quite a long way in. I imagine it would be difficult to do that, but it shouldn't take that long. I mean, the thing about compost is we all want it, we all need it, and we're always going to want it. It's not something it's not a faddy thing or a fashion thing where I think, oh, well, we don't want any compost this year, we're fed up with it now. It's a really good business kind of thing, really good business, because it's a business where it's a bit like funerals, they're not going out of fashion or anything. I mean, what it would be, I imagine there would be problems getting the stuff, but we won't know until somebody says, right, that's it. And there's no sign of that. I mean, there's no sign of anything legislative at all, Peat-free compost isn't going to be the top of
no.
any politician's list,
Well, will it be better or worse if we come out of the European Union, for example?
It's a good question. I don't really know what the answer to that is. I'm not really sure about that.
I just wondered where, if there was to be some sort of directive, where would it come down from?
in this country, I think, a government would have to look at where we are with the world around us and what's happening to it. And, I mean, we've just had the Committee on Climate Change, which is a government advisory body, has actually said in the last few weeks, one of its things it's recommending to sort of start to try and pull our personal carbon emissions back is to use peat-free compost. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
That they've actually used that work phrase in their sort of announcements.
Yeah.
I don't know how widely it's reached the wider world, or whether any gardening magazine has dared to cover it in a news story. But
yeah, I'm not sure about that from some stories I've
neither
heard.
am I.
Yeah. But what worries me about that is that it's putting the onus on the individual. And my issue is always that individuals, yes, do make up, I don't know what percentage, but obviously a large percentage, but then so does the industry as a whole. So, it's all right for me to go and buy 2 bags of compost a year or, 6 and be peat free, but that's no good if I'm going to nurseries and buying, £100 worth of plants and they're all grown in peat. Yeah. And I don't know how you regulate that when plants are crossing borders like they are at the moment. We buy most of our stuff in this country, I think, from Holland. Do we need to demand that they start growing peat free? Where does it kind of end? You can see why it's such a mess, I suppose.
Yeah, well, it is a mess. Yeah, I mean, modern life is a mess. It's too complicated, really, to just pull a few wires out and think it'll be all right. It's like going to one of those BT junction boxes and not knowing anything about it. Somebody opens the door and says, "Here you are. There's a problem right in there. Can you sort that out?"
Yeah.
I mean, life is very complex. Although kind of world around us is doing what it normally does, it's struggling a bit. I think if we were outside the EU, I guess, I mean, I'm no expert in these things, that we could say, we're not going to bring any plants in that are grown in peat. But I think it'd be a real battle. Yeah,
so do I.
Lots of wailing business people. I mean, I can just hear them now.
Yeah, we might find that our choice of plants shrinks quite a lot as well when they tell us to get on our bikes.
But it's a good point about the pushing this back to the individual to solve the problem. I mean, you're absolutely right. That we're way beyond that point, really. This is what happened. This is what didn't work with the market, with the side thing. Because people can only make choices if they're informed.
Yeah.
And most of the people I absolutely believe buying bags of dirt aren't informed. So the whole thing is just kind of self-cancelling. It doesn't work.
No.
And it's partly down to people like me, because I think we just haven't got the message out there. But I mean, it's down to everybody like me, whether you're just sitting here on a sort of dull day in June, or whether you're on the TV on a Friday night or you're on the radio on a Sunday afternoon. But you don't hear, there's a few notable people who are talking about it, but most of them are not. I mean, where are they?
I think they're not allowed to. I think, honestly, it's not.
I mean, there's nothing stopping them talking about buying a bag of peat-based compost is actually.
I think I would beg to differ, actually. I think it comes from higher up within the organisations they work for, who set the agenda, basically, of that particular programme or that newspaper or that magazine. Speaking from what I've heard anecdotally, I'm not sure actually they are 100% to blame, because they can only talk about what they can talk about. So, yeah, I mean, I'm good at kind of pointing the finger, but in that instance, I think maybe it runs a bit bit deeper. Not everyone's as lucky as I am, where I can just say exactly what I want and talk about what I want. Yeah, I think it is a problem, and that does indicate that